Let's start with a fact so shocking it recalibrates everything you thought you knew about the Iraqi dinar investment, the single most critical precondition for a global currency revaluation. A step dismissed for years as impossible by mainstream financiers and deemed perpetually tomorrow by the guru community has silently been achieved. While forums buzz with decoded dates and clandestine banking memos, the real, tangible, and official financial architecture of Iraq transformed under the world's nose. The Central Bank of Iraq, under direct mandate from the International Monetary Fund, has successfully killed the ghost that haunted the dinar for 2 decades, the multiple exchange rate system. This isn't speculation from Frank26 or analysis from Pimpy. This is the cold, hard reality of concluded monetary policy. As of the first quarter of 2025, there is now only one unified, market-driven exchange rate for the Iraqi dinar, hovering consistently around 1,310 IQD to 1 USD, the corrupt, arbitrage-friendly system of a cheap official rate for the elite and a costly street rate for the people is officially extinct. Think about the profound implication of that for a moment. For over 20 years, the very definition of the dinar's value was schizophrenic, allowing hope to flourish in the gap between rates. That gap is now closed permanently. This unification is the bedrock, the non-negotiable foundation upon which any future financial event, whether a gradual float or a sudden revaluation, must be built. You cannot launch a rocket from a swamp. You need a concrete pad. The Central Bank of Iraq has just finished pouring that concrete, letting it cure under the scrutiny of the IMF, and has declared it ready for use. This means every past prediction, every old timeline, every theory predicated on the old, broken system is now obsolete. We are in a new game with a new, clear, and singular rulebook. The confusion that Frank26 and Pimpy are reportedly clearing isn't about interpreting vague clues anymore. It's about explaining the seismic significance of this fait accompli to an audience conditioned to look for secrets in the shadows, when the monumental truth is now published in broad daylight on the Central Bank of Iraq's website and in IMF staff reports. This achievement cannot be overstated. The multi-rate system was a cancer on Iraq's economy, a structured mechanism for looting the state's dollar reserves. Politically connected parties could access dollars at 1,190, sell them on the market at 1,450, and instantly pocket a profit of 260 dinars per dollar, draining billions from the national treasury. This distortion made a mockery of monetary policy and imprisoned the dinar in a cycle of artificial weakness. Unifying the rate was an act of financial surgery to remove this tumor. Process was painful and deliberate, gradually reducing the supply of cheap dollars in the currency auction, introducing new financial instruments like the single treasury account, and aggressively pursuing a more flexible exchange rate regime. The resistance from those who benefited from the corruption was fierce, which is why this process took years and faced multiple setbacks. Its completion is a testament to immense political and international pressure. So, when you hear the phrase, only own a dinar rate confirmed, you are not hearing a guru's hopeful interpretation. You are hearing an echo of a battle that has been won on the ground in Baghdad and in the boardrooms of Washington, D.C. This is the clearing of the confusion. The rate is no longer a matter of perspective. It is a measurable, tradable fact. For the investor, this changes the fundamental question. The question is no longer if the rates will unify. That chapter is closed. The new and far more potent question is why. Why did the Iraqi government, amidst immense internal pressure, endure this painful reform? Was it merely to satisfy IMF conditions for the next loan tranche, a technical box-ticking exercise? Or was it, as the investment community believes, a necessary precursor to something far greater, the final administrative hurdle before the dinar is repositioned on a global stage with a new, stronger value? The official narrative speaks of stability and transparency. The guru narrative sees this stability as the poised calm before a strategic storm. But both narratives now, for the first time, start from the same undeniable point of data: one country, one currency, one rate. Your entire framework for analysis must now pivot from waiting for a foundation to be laid to scrutinizing what structure is about to be built upon it. The silence from the mainstream financial press on the implications for foreign holders is deafening, but the roar of this completed reform is unmistakable. It signals the end of the beginning. Whatever comes next, it starts from a place of clarity the dinar has not known in a generation. Now, with the unified rate established as our new solid ground, we confront the multi-trillion-dollar question hanging in the air, a question that transforms from abstract hope into urgent, practical inquiry. What does a sovereign nation do with a newly stabilized currency? The answer to that reveals the Grand Canyon of interpretation that now separates the mainstream economic view from the dinar investment thesis. From the perspective of the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, the goal is achieved. A single market-driven rate allows for effective inflation control, rationalizes imports and exports, makes the economy predictable for foreign investment, and ultimately lets Iraq borrow internationally at lower, more sustainable rates. In this view, the story's climax has already happened. The revaluation was the slow, painful crawl from 1,460 to 1,310, a strengthening of about 10% that reflects growing confidence and reduced distortion. Full stop. The next chapters are about boring, technical progress, deepening the banking sector, issuing government bonds, and encouraging digital payments. This is the narrative of normalization, not transformation. It envisions the dinar as a functional, stable currency for a recovering oil state, not a global reserve asset. However, this is where the analysis from voices like Frank26 and Pimpy diverges radically, and where you must apply your sharpest critical thinking. They argue that viewing rate unification as the end goal is a catastrophic misreading of geopolitics and financial power. They posit that unification was never the finish line. It was the final qualifying lap before the main event. Their thesis is that Iraq, backed by certain international powers, is executing a long-term plan not merely to fix its economy, but to strategically reposition itself and its currency as a dominant financial force in a post-dollar world. The evidence they point to is circumstantial but voluminous. Iraq's repeated mentions of linking the dinar to gold or a basket of commodities, not just the dollar. Its high-profile discussions to become a regional financial hub connecting East and West. The fact it now settles multi-billion-dollar energy imports from Iran directly in dinar, not euros or dollars, and the broader coordinated movement among BRICS and neighboring Gulf states to conduct trade in local currencies. This is where the concept of intrinsic value moves from theory to potential reality. The argument is that the dinar's value should not be based on a managed float against the dollar, but on the staggering wealth of the nation it represents. Iraq sits atop some of the world's largest and most accessible oil reserves, along with vast minerals and agricultural potential. A currency backed by such tangible assets in a world losing faith in pure fiat money could command a vastly different valuation. The unified rate, therefore, is seen as the necessary, credible platform from which to launch this asset-backed recalibration. Think of it as resetting the scale to zero before placing the true weight upon it. Frank26 often speaks in terms of a reinstatement, suggesting the dinar will return to a pre-1990s strength, a time when it was on par with the British pound. Pimpy often focuses on the mechanical triggers, the full rollout of the new lower denomination banknotes, the completion of international banking agreements, and the final implementation of Iraq's financial reform laws. Both, however, anchor on the same premise, the painful. Corruption-fighting reform of rate unification was a house-cleaning exercise of monumental effort, undertaken not for its own sake, but to prepare the House for an esteemed guest, a new, globally recognized exchange rate. The stunning call to action for you right now is to actively listen to both of these competing narratives with this new foundational knowledge. When you hear a news clip about Iraq discussing trade in dinar with China, don't just hear a fact. Analyze it through both lenses. The mainstream lens sees reduced dollar dependency and smoother bilateral trade. The investment thesis lens sees a deliberate brick-by-brick construction of international demand for the dinar, creating the market conditions that would support and sustain a higher value. The silence from official channels about a specific high revaluation is interpreted not as a denial, as a necessary secrecy to prevent economic chaos and speculative attacks before the system is fully locked. We are now in the realm of interpreting motives behind observable actions. The single rate is the solved equation. The intention behind creating that single rate is the profound mystery you are now tasked with solving. Every piece of news from Baghdad, every IMF report, every guru interpretation must be filtered through this core binary question: was unification the finale or the overture? Your answer to that will define your entire journey from this point forward. This brings us to the ultimate moment of truth, a crossroads where patience meets prudence and where your role transforms from a passive holder into an active, discerning analyst. The completion of the single rate has effectively raised the curtain on the final act of this decade's long financial drama, and the spotlight is now glaringly fixed on two possible and mutually exclusive endings. In one ending, the story concludes with Iraq achieving a modest, stable currency, a victory of economic normalization that is profoundly important for the Iraqi people, but represents, for the foreign speculator, the gentle deflation of a grand dream into a modest reality. The other ending is the one etched into the heart of the investment community, a strategic, sovereign decision to revalue the dinar not as an economic adjustment, as a geopolitical power play rewriting the nation's financial destiny, and by extension, the fortune of those holding its currency. The evidence for this transformative ending is not found in bank screenshots or anonymous intel, but in the patterns of global shifts. Observe the trajectory first. Iraq painstakingly eradicates the internal corruption of its exchange rate, a move applauded by the IMF. Next, it actively pursues and signs international trade agreements that bypass the US dollar, settling in dinar or other local currencies, a move that aligns with the strategic interests of major powers like China and Russia. Concurrently, it floats the concept of a commodity-backed currency, direct challenge to the fiat dollar system. Finally, it prepares its domestic populace for a change with a new lower denomination currency series, the so-called deletion of the zeros, which is not merely a practical step for ease of use, but a psychological reset for a nation about to reintroduce its monetary unit to the world. When viewed in isolation, each step can be explained away as prudent reform. But when viewed as a sequential, deliberate campaign, first clean your house, then invite new trading partners, then propose a new basis for value, then reissue your currency, it forms a compelling narrative arc that points toward a climactic revaluation. This is the why that Frank26 and Pimpy are ultimately pointing to the unification with step one in a multi-step sovereign strategy, not a standalone reform. Therefore, your engagement now must be hyper-focused and ruthlessly objective. The era of vague promises is over. The new era demands verification against the bedrock of the unified rate. This is your call to action. Become a forensic auditor of information. For every new piece of data, apply a simple three-question litmus test. First, is it primary? Does it originate from the Central Bank of Iraq's official website, a verified government statement, or a major financial wire service like Reuters or Bloomberg? If it comes through a chain of forums, chats, or unverifiable videos, it fails the test. Second, does it logically follow from the achieved reality of the single rate? Does it discuss next stage policies like the successful launch of the new currency notes, the maturity of Iraq's bond market, or the volume of non-oil dinar-denominated exports? Or does it jump to a specific fantastical date and number without explaining the mechanics? The former has merit, the latter is noise. Third, and most importantly, does it acknowledge the legitimate, massive counter-argument? Any analysis that does not honestly address the monumental economic risks a sudden, high revaluation poses to Iraq's non-oil economy, the instant destruction of export competitiveness, the potential for rampant inflation is not analysis, it's cheerleading. The most credible voices right now are those who can articulate both the transformative potential and the formidable obstacles. Your final and most powerful call to action is this: embrace the clarity of the crossroads. The unified rate has forced the story to a point of decision. The waiting is no longer for a sign that the foundation will be poured. The foundation is set. You are now waiting to see which structure the architect chooses to build upon it: a sturdy, utilitarian building for a recovering nation, or a gleaming tower that changes the skyline of global finance. This definitive moment is what you have held on for. Use the concrete fact of the one dinar rate as your shield against hype and your sword against misinformation. Watch the primary sources. Understand the geopolitical currents. The final answer will not come from a guru's whisper, but from the official pronouncements of a sovereign nation that has, at great cost, just one control of its own monetary destiny. The wait continues, but it is now a different quality of wait, a watchful, informed, and decisive vigil on the threshold of a proven new beginning. The journey you started in speculation may well end in the realm of sovereign finance, and your ultimate task is to know the difference. The single confirmed fact is this: the Central Bank of Iraq, under a mandatory program with the International Monetary Fund, has successfully unified the exchange rate. As of 2024 and into 2025, the previous multi-tier system, comprising a cheap official rate for government transactions, a currency auction rate, and a higher parallel market rate, has been eradicated. The CBI's stated and achieved goal was to establish a single market-driven exchange rate, which has been floating within a narrow band around 1.310 IQD to 1 USD. This is not guru intel. This is the operational result of the CBI's monetary policy, verifiable through their official statements, financial data releases, and IMF staff reports. The unification process involved critical technical steps, gradually reducing the supply of US dollars in the daily currency auction to curb arbitrage and speculation, introducing a new electronic foreign currency platform, and allowing greater flexibility for the exchange rate to be set by market forces. The economic rationale for this, per the IMF and World Bank, was to eliminate a massive distortion that facilitated corruption, drained foreign reserves, crippled effective monetary policy, and hindered long-term investment. The successful closure of the gap between the official and parallel market rates is hailed by international institutions as Iraq's most significant financial reform in 2 decades, prerequisite for any future economic stability and growth. This reform's primary beneficiary is the Iraqi state itself and its citizens, as it aims to stabilize prices, build domestic confidence in the banking sector, and create a transparent environment for business. From the strict standpoint of global forex guidelines and mainstream financial analysis, the concept of a near-term, large-scale revaluation of the IQD to a dramatically higher value is not supported by any credible data or policy directive. In fact, such an event would directly contradict the stated goals of the IMF program and sound monetary economics. A sudden orders of magnitude increase in the IQD's value, for example, to 1 IQD to 1 USD would be catastrophic for the Iraqi economy. It would instantly render all of Iraq's non-oil exports and domestic industries uncompetitive, induce severe deflation and unemployment, and cripple the government's budget, which relies on dinar-denominated spending of dollar-derived oil revenues. The IMF's explicit goal is exchange rate stability and flexibility, not appreciation. The CBI's mandate is to control inflation and maintain sufficient foreign reserves, not to engineer a windfall for external currency speculators. The observable path forward, as outlined in official documents, involves continued focus on strengthening the banking sector, promoting financial inclusion, developing a local debt market, and potentially, over a period of many years, seeing a gradual, organic appreciation of the dinar as the economy diversifies and productivity increases. This is the standard gradual path of an emerging market economy, not a discrete speculative event. Discussions about deleting zeros refer to a potential future currency redenomination, which is a monetary administrative process that does not alter the currency's external value or purchasing power. It changes the nominal scale, not the real value. For instance, if 1,000 old dinars become 1 new dinar, the exchange rate would adjust proportionally from approximately 1,310 to 131 per USD, with no change in actual worth. Therefore, the investment thesis promoting an imminent high-value RV relies on interpreting the necessary and completed reform of rate unification as a secret precursor to a different, unstated sovereign plan. This interpretation exists entirely outside the framework of official data, IMF conditionality, and standard central banking practice. It substitutes observable policy sequences where step A logically leads to step B, with a narrative where step A is secretly preparation for an unrevealed, transformative step X. The analysis of current financial guidelines leaves no room for this step X. The calls for asset backing with gold or oil remain theoretical discussions with no binding policy framework. The international trade in local currencies is a growing trend among many nations seeking to reduce dollar dependency for transaction costs and geopolitical reasons. It does not necessitate or imply a massive revaluation of those currencies. It simply facilitates direct settlement. For any individual following this topic, the critical, data-driven takeaway is that the Iraqi monetary system has undergone a profound and positive correction to function as a normal, modern system. The expectation of profit from a currency, revaluation, hinges on a belief in a parallel financial reality that operates contrary to established economic principles and the stated, measurable goals of the very institutions managing the process. The confirmed single rate is the cornerstone of a rebuilt house for the Iraqi economy. The foundational data and guidelines do not support the assertion that this house was rebuilt solely to be immediately given away to foreign holders of its old currency notes.